Big Ten football is in the air. Welcome to the Pregame Keys on the podcast. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We are just inside Spartan Stadium, just outside the Ohio State locker room. That's on my left. Michigan State locker room on my right. These teams are going to meet in prime time under the lights. Michigan State fans have been out on the river tailgating. They're juiced up. They're ready for action. Little road test for the Buckeyes as they get started in Big Ten play.
Yeah, you can feel it. There's a little bit of a je ne sais quoi in the air. The Spartans fans love their French.
Yeah, they do.
And they
famously.
And they also, Lafayette, I believe, is from here. They also love pressuring the quarterback. And so key number one for me is we're just going to dive right in.
That is a dive.
Is keeping Will Howard upright, making sure that the Ohio State quarterback has time to throw, making sure that Michigan State isn't affecting him as much as they've affected quarterbacks in their first 4 games. They have 15 sacks on the season, which I think is number 1 in the country. I know it's number 1 in the Big Ten. And so really for Michigan State, that's a way you generate energy in the stadium early for this crowd, is by getting out there, picking up a sack on 3rd and 3 and doing things that throw Ohio State off the timing of their offense. And in the first road game, first night game on the road, first Big Ten game, there's going to be a little bit of those early game jitters. So for Ohio State, it's about making sure you don't let Michigan State get confidence early, and that starts on defense, but also on offense. So for Ohio State's offense, it's about the offensive line protecting Will Howard, which they've done a great job of so far.
And I think you could start almost any game talking about the offensive line and its importance. And I think, if there have been, I don't know, any remaining skeptics out there, I would understand. If you still have the memory of the Cotton Bowl or, the plays in short yardage over the previous couple of years where Ohio State's offensive line didn't move the line of scrimmage, didn't create the holes, didn't protect to the level that the Buckeyes expect. I understand. I feel like you can see clear progress against similar levels of competition from this year compared to last year for the way Josh Simmons is playing, the way Josh Fryer is playing, the early returns when you get Donovan Jackson back out there. He goes right out and grades as a champion. What Seth McLaughlin has brought in the middle, Austin Sarabel and Tegra Shabola, both getting their feet wet and playing and grading out pretty well as first-time starters through these first couple of weeks. I think that there's a lot of signs of progress. But as you mentioned, like Michigan State, if you're talking about the ramp up week 1, week 2, week 3, and now into Big Ten play and a defensive front that is probably the strength of Michigan State's roster, all told, we're going to get a really good gauge and barometer, I think, of where Ohio State is on the offensive line tonight. And I think that should be the case. You're always going to watch them. It's always going to be critical to protect Will Howard, to open up lanes of attack for Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, but tonight maybe a little extra stock in that.
Yeah, what you said is important because people are going to look at it and say, well, who has Ohio State played, right? They're going to say, well, the offensive line looked better against Akron, it looked better against Western Michigan and Marshall. But it's not about how they looked this year, it's about how they looked this year compared to last. Yeah. And last year they played Youngstown State and other bad teams. I can't even recall how bad they were. And the offensive line didn't look that good. So I'm not going to go into this saying that that's a concern against Michigan State. I do think it's a good test for Ohio State, which is also how I'm viewing Aiden Childs, the Michigan State quarterback, because I think he's an elevated version of Stone Earl from Marshall, who the Ohio State obviously struggled with a little bit a week ago in Ohio Stadium. That struggle should be made easier by the fact that Tyleik Williams is healthy. Ohio State's depth chart is complete. There is nobody on the injury report that is even that would probably likely have traveled anyway, which is pretty remarkable considering where we are in the season. But for this team, making sure that Aiden Childs doesn't get going early for Michigan State, I think, is just as important as making sure Will Howard stays upright for the Buckeyes. Childs is a really athletic guy, but he is willing to make mistakes, and you can get to him and frazzle him and maybe rattle him a little early. If you do that, this should be an easy night for Ohio State. If you let him get confident, though, and let him make a couple big throws down the field with Nick Marsh back and their top 2 receivers who both missed last week are returning, they have some guys on offense that can beat you, but it starts with getting to the quarterback. So whether it's Tyleik Williams or whether it's Jack and JT, whether it's the linebackers forcing things and Jim Knowles sending extra guys, which they didn't do much of a week ago, you got to rattle this quarterback early because he is willing to turn it over. He's turned it over. He's thrown 7 interceptions. He's had 11 turnover-worthy plays this season. You got to take advantage of those.
Yeah. Tyleik Williams in the return there, that's going to be critical as you watch what happens for the Rushman and the Ohio State defensive line, which, however you want to assess the way that they played a week ago, Ohio State has been pretty critical and has certainly wanted to see more from that group collectively this week. Maybe it's as simple as just putting Tyleik Williams back in there, and you wonder, well, it's the pregame keys. Why haven't they talked about the availability report? As you mentioned, Berm, there's nobody on it. Like, it's all with all due respect to the walk-ons, critically important to the team. There's just 4 names on it. None of them were likely to be traveling with Ohio State for this game anyway. So Tyleik Williams is back. What does that mean for the front? We've seen Donovan Jackson. There was no sign of rust a week ago in his first game of the year. Cody Simon had come back before the off week. So you look at this, and wherever you see any wood, you can knock on it. I'm not trying to create any jinxes for it, but like, Ohio State is going into Big Ten play as healthy as it could possibly be. That's pretty remarkable. There are not I'm struggling off the top of my head to think of other times that Ohio State got to the end of September and it wasn't like, how are they going to maneuver around this? They have 1 or 2 things, and who's coming back and when. It's a long year. They're going to have to deal with the wear and tear, and they just did a week ago without Tyleik Williams. But when you're trying to get ready for this stretch, tonight against Michigan State, a physical battle a week from now against Iowa, and then that trip out to Oregon, as of this moment, Ryan Day could not ask for more.
No, and that's why you have to take advantage of it. You can't. Off to our right here, we see the pyrotechnics getting ready for the night. Like, this is going to be...
This is kind of like The Notebook.
Yeah, it's going to be a good energy in here tonight, as we already said. At Michigan State, when we've been here a handful of times now over the last dozen years or so, and the first quarter the crowd always has good juice. There's a chance for some rain around the same time.
There it is.
We're going to be...
There it is.
There's a chance for Ohio State to come out and maybe slip. And I don't mean, I mean literally and figuratively, because Michigan State's going to try to throw some early punches to establish themselves. So just be prepared for those if you're Jim Knowles. The Buckeyes have really not played particularly well on the first drive of each of the games defensively to this point. And you know that these are the best skill players you're going to play against all year. So finding out what Michigan State is doing early and adapting early is going to be critically important in this game, because if the crowd, the energy starts to get going late into the first quarter, into the second quarter, I think then you have what you don't want, which is a football game in the third and fourth.
Yeah, I'll dip into the cliche bucket for one of the keys that I'm watching, outside of just like the way that the defensive line responds to that challenge. But something else that Jim Knowles said this week just really resonated with me. We've been covering this team for a long time. Almost always when the start fast conversation comes up, it is about the offense. And Jim Knowles made it a point that has to happen for the defense and the Silver Bullets. They did adjust last week, and you don't give up any points in the second half, you're going to feel pretty good about that. You want to take the yardage and the rushing totals that they allowed, still by and large pretty good. But they did not have an opening drive that anybody really felt good about. We can go back and break down what some of those things were. We did that with Zach Bourne on Buckeye Q this week. But that's another thing that Jim Knowles is putting out there. You don't evaluate an entire season off of one game, and you don't evaluate a game off of one drive. Ohio State was able to come back. But this is the first time that, as you said, you don't want it to become a game into the second quarter, into the third quarter, and the fourth quarter. If you are the more talented squad, which undeniably Ohio State is, if you can take care of some of that business and at least put your stamp on it or prove that you can adjust quickly, the first drive may not be perfect. Aiden Childs is a very athletic quarterback. The knife's edge stuff, the risks that he's willing to take can lead to big plays. It can also lead to big plays for the Ohio State defense. But, this is the first time that they're playing a Big Ten game, but it's also their first road trip of the season. This is a new thing. Now, they're veteran. All these guys have played in big games, virtually all of them. It's not going to be a situation that's too big for them, but it's the first time this year that they're going to have to go and handle communication. It's the first time they've had to do it with helmet communication, which could be something there for Will Howard to watch. Will they huddle more? Like, all these things are the first time for Ohio State this year. Can they get all that figured out on both sides of the football and start fast? Yes, it's a cliche, but it's pretty important for a game like this.
Cliches are cliche because they're generally true. Like, that's how they work. Either way, we're going to find out in just about two hours or so what Ohio State is made of, this year. It's not just the Marshall game that had the opening drive. Akron missed a field goal on their opening drive. Western Michigan moved the ball on their opening drive. That's the drive of the game generally when you don't really have a good feel for what the opponent is doing. Michigan State's played 4 games. Ohio State's only played 3. The Buckeyes have done a lot of generic stuff offensively. Michigan State has had to empty the playbook to try to win on the road at Boston College. You know what this team is that you're playing. So know their strengths and go get them, because Jim Knowles and this defense, if they want to be regarded as the best in the country, need to take the lessons learned from a week ago and make sure that they don't get repeated tonight. And again, it wasn't a bad defensive performance, but Jim Knowles didn't name a defensive player of the week. The Buckeyes coaches were the ones that were saying, this isn't up to standard, this isn't good enough. And so that doesn't happen because they're feeling like just poking their players. I mean, this happens because they felt like there was a potential for that to crack into something else. So you want to make sure tonight is a firm reminder that that is not going to be a bigger problem.
Okay. Is there anything we didn't mention? This is take 2 of the Pregame Keys, unfortunately. We weren't quite Big Ten ready. I'm going to blame the raucous Michigan State fans. I think they turned off our microphones when we recorded it the first time.
Maybe. I mean, I don't even think people needed to know that, but all you need to know,
we're full disclosure here.
All you know is 2 hours from now, they're going to be running up this tunnel, and kickoff is going to be happening in Spartan Stadium on Peacock, 7:30 p.m. Saturday night. Don't worry about watching Alabama, Georgia. That game's going to suck. Watch the Buckeyes take on Michigan State tonight at Spartan Stadium, live from East Lansing.
I'm going to assume that everyone watching the Pregame Keys on the podcast is already aware of that, and they will be tuned in. They've made arrangements, if that's a local establishment, they brought it, signed up for Peacock for you, or if you're at home on a free trial, whatever. It's coming. Kick off, and they start a Big Ten play for the Buckeyes in a couple hours here. They will walk down this ramp in about 30 minutes, depending on when you're watching. But from right now, they'll be here shortly. So hope you're ready for that set. There'll be full post-game coverage. If we can get the media room to comply, we'll try and stream the post-game press conference, but we'll have the notebook and snap judgments no matter what, and no matter what the final score is, as Ohio State plays Michigan State in this building here shortly. Thanks for joining us on the podcast for the Pregame Keys. He's Berm. I'm Austin. Enjoy the night.